Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So we'll be reading today from Uncommon Wisdom, Life and Teachings of Ajahn Pannavaddho. Body. Of all the meditation subjects that the Buddha recommended, body contemplation is probably the most unpopular with Western practitioners. Although body contemplation is very worthwhile, for some strange reason it's not encouraged much in the West. Very few teachers even mention it. Why is that? They must not realize how valuable it is. Contemplation of the body is an essential component of the Buddha's teachings. This may seem strange in an age when people know all about the world, but know very little about themselves. They've studied science, so when you ask them the reason for doing this or that, or how something works, they can go into great detail. Even if they themselves don't know, they can easily find out by asking someone who does know, or by looking it up in books or online. But when it comes to the human body, what do they know? Even if they know physiology in the medical sense, all they've done is study someone else's body or pictures of the human body in a textbook, not their own body. But surely our bodies are extremely important. If we didn't have a human body, how would we experience the world? The human body allows us to access the world. It is our outlet into the world, so to speak. Surely to know the body's true nature is essential to our well-being. In order to comprehend its nature, we should ask ourselves, what actually is the human body? What's it composed of? Is it a pleasant thing or not? We can put aside our preconceived ideas about it and just ask objectively, is the body something attractive or not? Let's have a look. Most people in the world seem to think that the body is very attractive, that it's the most desirable thing. But let's look at it and see whether that's true. What happens if we don't wash it for a few days? We've got to keep washing the thing. Otherwise, it stinks before long and becomes unbearable. Let a few strands of hair fall into a plate of food, and we quickly lose our appetite. Why? Head hair and body hair are inherently filthy, which is the reason that we have to continuously wash them. In fact, nothing that comes into contact with any part of the human body remains clean for long. Due to the dirt and the smell that accumulate on our bodies, our clothing and bed linen must be constantly laundered. Even the food we eat, once it's ground between the teeth and mixed with saliva, becomes filthy as well. There are many such aspects of the body that we must look at to determine whether it's a pleasant thing or not, whether it's beautiful or not. You should search for the truth of this matter. After all, most people think that they are their bodies. If that's the case, surely you should want to know something about yourself. When you are so interested to know everything about the world, why do you leave out the one thing that is the most important of all, yourself? Why not try to get to know yourself? The first step in trying to get to know yourself is to question the nature of the body, because the body is the grossest part of who you are, or who you think you are. However, as you probe more deeply into body contemplation, you begin to realize that the body, in fact, is not you. It comes from the world, and it returns to the world. It's simply a part of this earth. It consists entirely of atomic structures, atoms, molecules, chemicals, and so on. And it's nothing apart from these things. It doesn't go beyond the state of physical matter. When you look at it properly, you can see that it isn't really you. It doesn't belong to you. You can't even control its destiny. The body at birth is derived from the world. At death, it returns to the world. There's no way to stop it from rejoining the earth as organic matter. When you cling to the body, it's almost as if you were confining yourself in a prison house. the human body becomes a prison that restricts you to a certain conditions from which you cannot free yourself. So you must understand the body's true nature and realize that the body is not what you really are. That clinging to it creates undesirable consequences. Search and find the truth of the matter. After all, why not examine the body? It's such an obvious thing to look at. When you do, you begin to see that the whole outlook on the world depends on the body. Because human beings are attached to their bodies, they have to put up with the vicissitudes of bodily existence, most of which are quite unpleasant. The body has its own momentum. You can't control it. It gets sick, and you can't prevent it. It grows old, and you can't prevent it. Eventually, in its own time, it dies, and you can't prevent that either. The body belongs to the earth. It originates from earthly substance and then returns to the earth. In fact, the body can only live in a physical environment that is suited to bodily existence. The body requires earth to stand on, air to breathe, water to drink, food to eat, energy and heat to function, and so on. All these things come from the earth. Because of that, this body is really just part of the earth. But still, we insist on grasping at it and claiming ownership of it. Once we own it, we also own all its difficulties that come along with bodily existence, which we find we don't like. We don't like being sick, we don't like growing old, and we don't like dying. The body is something that we are familiar enough with that we can take parts of it in our mind and keep our attention on them, turning them around and thinking about them to see their attributes and their associations, to see their cause and effects relationships. Because we know so much about the body already, it's a very good basic subject for meditation. Body contemplation takes two basic directions. One is the way of samatha, using calm and concentration as a basis. The other is the way of vipassana, using insight and wisdom as a basis. To practice the way of samatha, you keep your attention on one aspect of the body, like the skin, without thinking much about it. Just keep the skin fixed in your mind as much as you can. One advantage of using this method is that your mind becomes calm and focused. And because the focus of your attention has been concentrated on a part of the body, it's easy to then turn and investigate that body part to develop a deeper understanding of its true nature. The vipassana way of doing body contemplation begins by questioning the nature of the body. What is the nature of the skin? Where does the skin come from? What is it composed of? What happens if I don't wash it? Suppose I cut off a piece. What lies underneath it? What internal organs is the skin covering up, and what are they like? Consider all aspects of the parts that make up the body. This is the way of developing wisdom, questioning all the time, searching for what's really there. To begin with, take the body as the body. That is, take it in the way you normally experience it in your life. You are not attempting to superimpose a radical new view on the body. Rather, you want to go more deeply into what it is right there in front of you and expose some obvious truths about it. You are trying to see this body in what might be called the light of truth, trying to see what bodily existence means in such a deep and profound way that you realize the body is not you. It is not yours. This is the important point. Later on, you can examine the body as a mental image. At the beginning of body contemplation, however, you must look at the body in the way you normally do. Otherwise, the investigation becomes too nebulous and the practice doesn't progress properly. The first aim of the practice is to discover for yourself the body's repulsive nature. Repulsive in the sense that it doesn't reflect the nice image you have of yourself. This discovery counters the normal view that the body is an attractive and desirable part of who you are, a part that deserves your constant fondness and attention. On the other hand, you also understand that the body is a necessary and valuable instrument, because without it, you do not have a physical basis for your mental faculties. Without a physical body, you would not have access to the faculties of thinking and recollection. There'd be just bare knowing, and that's all. Therefore, you must have the body to function. So although it is seen as undesirable, you are also aware of its necessity. As long as you maintain that balanced view of the body in your practice, you can avoid negative states of alienation and aversion. Although it's up to each individual to decide the best method to use for body contemplation, starting with the hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin, usually provides a very good basis. If you feel you would rather investigate the body as arms, legs, head, organs, and so on, that's quite a legitimate practice too. Reflect on how the human body is merely a combination of various parts. It's not a completely homogeneous entity at all. Apart from the head, most bodily parts can be cut off and the body will continue to function. An enormous amount can be removed from the body without death occurring. Then you can reflect. If I refer to this as my body, what about this arm? Is it mine? If it's cut off, is it still mine? So you begin body contemplation by focusing on the parts that make up the body: head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, bones, and so on. You can either mentally visualize each one or focus your attention on the location of each part, whichever you prefer. This exercise is the training for wisdom, not the wisdom itself. When you keep practicing in this manner, probing and questioning continuously over a long time, you will suddenly see one of the body parts from a totally different angle. It's as though you see the full implications of it in relation to the realms of mind and matter. Take skin, for example. You know its characteristics and its basic functions. Skin is a thin layer of surface tissue that is necessary to protect the internal organs from exposure and maintain the life of the body. You are aware of all that, but what are the implications of skin as far as your notions of self are concerned? This is what the training for wisdom is trying to uncover. In the end, you realize that skin is just part of the world. It comes from the world, and it goes back to the world. It isn't you. There's nothing of you in it. How could it be you? What you cling to as an integral part of your self-identity is merely a perishable physical substance. When you see these implications clearly, it feels almost as though you are giving up a cherished part of yourself. Seeing the implications and letting go of the attachment is the work of wisdom. It means knowing directly that the skin is not self, not merely thinking about it. Skin couldn't be self. It has no relation to self. That is one method used to overcome attachment to the body. Without developing your faculty of wisdom, you are unaware of how much attachment you have for it. You don't realize how much your self-identity is bound up with the body. For your own physical and mental welfare, it's very important to overcome that attachment. Another effective method for overcoming bodily attachment is the Asubha contemplation. The Asubha contemplation entails focusing on the human body's inherently impure or loathsome nature. Much of our discontent comes from taking the body as the basis of who we are. It's a central feature of our self-identity. Because of this deep-seated notion, we project a definite sense of self into all our actions. We deliberately plan our whole lives around desires related to the body. By contemplating the body's impure nature, we can experience it as inherently unstable, impermanent, and repulsive. In that way, we can reduce the craving built up around the body until eventually we are able to free ourselves from the strong sense of self associated with it. Because the skin so easily fools us with its deceptive appearance, it deserves a very careful examination. The thin layer of tissue covers the flesh and internal organs of the body. Although at a glance it may appear clean and attractive, closer inspection shows a scaly, wrinkled layer that exudes sweat and grease. Only constant washing and cleaning make it bearable to live with. After thoroughly investigating the outer layer, mentally strip off the skin and investigate the internal organs. Follow whatever method best suits your natural temperament. As you contemplate the body, certain parts or characteristics should begin to stand out and catch your attention. You should focus special attention on those parts. When you investigate deeply into just one body part, until seeing its true nature clearly with wisdom, you will be able to extend that understanding to include the entire body, because all bodily substance has the same nature. It's filthy, disgusting, and repulsive through and through. No desirable and satisfactory personal identity can be found there. But you must understand very clearly that the objective of this contemplation is not to stir up aversion for the body. That would be wrong. You only want to see its loathsome nature. It's rather like opening your refrigerator and seeing a rotten piece of meat that has been there for the last 5 weeks. You'd feel it was repulsive, but you wouldn't feel hatred for it. You'd just take it out and drop it in the garbage. That's all. Likewise with the body, it isn't hatred you want. That's wrong. You want to experience the experience of loathsomeness, a feeling of dismay that you've grasped this body at birth, that you're bound to this body, and that you have to live with it until it dies. Still, while you remain in this body, you have an opportunity to see the Dhamma. In that sense, it's quite valuable. You must use it in the right way to overcome your delusion. This is the true purpose of body contemplation. After practicing the Asubha contemplation intensively, you may later feel irritable or even angry for no apparent reason. This is a reaction to the body contemplation itself. When your deeply ingrained views of physical identity are probed and questioned, the internal forces of delusion build up a feeling of irritations or annoyance. You may feel like a bear with a sore on its head, as they say. In order to quell these negative emotions, you should combine body contemplation with another practice, like anapanasati or metta, to calm down and cool off. This is consistent with what the Buddha taught. He said that when one does body practice, one should do anapanasati as well. The body is an interesting object to investigate. You can divide up the body in various ways. Another way is to investigate the body in terms of the physical elements of earth, water, fire, and air. The natural world around us appears to be very real and solid, but it only appears that way because our bodies are also composed of the same natural material elements. Fundamentally, there is no difference between the makeup of the human body and the makeup of the physical world. In modern terms, they both consist of atoms and molecules. You should look at the body from that angle and reflect on it. You should also look at the body with the understanding that the 4 elements of earth, water, fire, and air are actually just symbolic representations. In examining matter, scientists have never found an earth element anywhere, nor have they found air, water, or fire elements. They do not exist as actual physical properties. In fact, contemplation of the 4 physical elements is a psychological method of analyzing matter, and mind is the main requirement for making the analysis. You have to contemplate those characteristics subjectively. The mind uses concepts about earth, water, fire, and air to represent material qualities such as solidity, fluidity, heat, and motion, so as to understand the body on a more subtle level. People grasp at bodies because they imagine themselves to be secure in bodies, even though the body is not a secure refuge. It is always subject to the uncertainty of disease, old age, and death. At the same time, the body is a very sensitive organism. It relies upon a suitable environment, which means it must have air to breathe, temperatures that are reasonable for human life, and protection from dangers in its environment. All of these factors are necessary. If they are not available or if they change, the body will perish. Because our bodies are so inherently vulnerable, we should really be looking for security in other ways. When we realize that, in fact, the body does not offer us the security that we want, we should examine the nature of that insecurity to see if there isn't a better way to find a secure refuge than grasping at the human body. When people identify with their bodies, they become concerned about them. Because the body is the basis of their life, they're afraid of losing that base. The body is like a home they can come back to. When their minds go whizzing off somewhere, they can always come back to home base. It anchors them, so they feel secure. If the base wasn't there, where would they come back to? There'd be nowhere to return to. When people feel they are drifting, they want to find a foothold, an anchor to hold them firm. Because every part of the body is constantly changing, it is not reliable enough to provide such a secure refuge. Our personal stake in it puts us under its unstable influence. Whatever happens to the body is then experienced as happening to us. When it becomes sick, we become worried and depressed. If the body gets injured, we're distraught. We're distraught because we're attached to the body, thinking of it as an integral part of who we are. When it dies, we're suddenly homeless. Because of our attachment, whatever happens to it happens to us. Once we realize that the body's true nature really is, we are freed from our attachment to it. Then what happens to the body is something that happens separately, externally. It's as though somebody else's body is injured or sick. Pain is experienced in the body, but there is no concern about the pain. It isn't me. It isn't mine. Because it isn't me or mine, it never again has the same sway over our emotions. It no longer pulls us along with it. The mind remains separate and free. Being separate and free, it is also secure. It knows that delusion has been at least partially eliminated. It knows that whatever happens, it won't go in the wrong way. It won't fall back. This is the result we are working for in body contemplation. Once you have examined the body and realized that it is not yourself, when something happens to the body, you are not concerned about it in the same way as before. You know that it's not happening to you. You realize that although it's happening to the body, that body is not you. Although the physical condition may be unpleasant, the unpleasantness is merely the body's unpleasantness. You are not affected. The purpose of body contemplation is to realize that the body is not you, nor does it belong to you. The body belongs to the natural world. You have grasped at the body and continue to grasp at it by maintaining it in good condition. But the time will come when that body has to return to the world of nature. When you truly realize within yourself that the body is merely a temporary home, something you have on loan, so to speak, then concern for the body drops away. Fear of death also drops away, because you realize that death is simply the death of the physical body. This understanding is not a matter of being alienated from your physical body. Rather, it is seeing with wisdom the truth about its natural state. There are many different forms of body contemplation, but regardless of which method you use, the basic purpose of meditation practice is to learn to see the body in the light of truth, and thus understand its true nature. This is the crux of the matter. By seeing it for what it is, you realize that it isn't self. That fundamental realization transforms your whole perspective. Having realized that the body is not self, you simply drop it. Eventually, you see that all of life is just shadows, like images flickering on a cinema screen. The knowledge you gain from seeing the truth is very powerful. At the time of death, when the body dies, you know that it's not you that dies. By bringing you to this realization, body contemplation gives you a great deal of spiritual and emotional strength and relieves the mind of an enormous burden, both now and in the future. And I have one poem by Rumi about the body to follow up. The center of the fire. No more wine for me. I'm past delighting in the thick red and the clear white. I'm thirsty for my own blood as it moves into a field of action. Draw the keenest blade you have and strike until the head circles about the body. Make a mountain of skulls like that. Split me apart. Don't stop at the mouth. Don't listen to anything I say. I must enter the center of the fire. Fire is my child, but I must be consumed and become fire. Why is there crackling and smoke? Because the firewood and the flames are still talking. You are too dense, go away. You are too wavering, I have solid form. In the blackness, those two friends keep arguing, like a wanderer with no face, like the most powerful bird in existence, sitting on its perch, refusing to move. What can I say to someone so curled up with wanting, so constricted in his love? Break your pitcher against a rock. We don't need any longer to haul pieces of the ocean around. We must drown away from heroism and descriptions of heroism. Like a pure spirit lying down, pulling its body over it, like a bride her husband, for a cover to keep her warm. Someone who goes with half a loaf of bread to a small place that fits like a nest around him. Someone who wants no more, who's not himself, longed for by anyone else. He is a letter to everyone. You open it. It says live. The mystery does not get clearer by repeating the question, nor is it bought with going to amazing places. Until you've kept your eyes and your wanting still for 50 years, you don't begin to cross over from confusion. That's all.
Annamayanga Vargataya Sadhukaranta Dhamasi
Sadhu, sadhu.